Hey everyone, how's it going? My name is Richard Moglen, and welcome back to a Stock Market Outlook video sponsored by MarketSmith. As always, we'll analyze the market indexes, leading stocks, talk about a few different sources of sentiment, the IBD Big Picture article, and finally the Wishing Wealth GMI signal. And at the end of the video, I'll put all those different sources of information together and give you my take on the current markets. And if you do enjoy my analysis, please take the time right now and leave me a like down below. It really helps me out and my channel. And of course, subscribe if you want to see more videos just like this one every single week. It's completely free. So with that said, let's go ahead and start with the Nasdaq composite. Obviously, super strong end to last week, starting with the push here on Tuesday, reconfirmation on Wednesday, retaking the 21 EMA, and then fall through Thursday and Friday, finishing just a hair above that 50 SMA. And taking this over to a weekly chart, you can see we had a strong outside week on the highest volume since the start of this correction. Definitely a positive sign, and it was an outside week because we undercut this prior week's lows, closed above it strongly, and back above that 10-week line right here in red. However, we're still below this black line here, which is the 40-week, and on the daily chart, that translates over to the 200 SMA. So I love to see us start to build up here, build out a right-hand side, and get back above that longer-term moving average. Now, right now, we are a little bit short-term extended, but at the very beginning of a cycle, things can really push extremely hard and stay overbought for a lot longer than people think. But it is important to keep in mind that we could see some consolidation, sideways action. I think that would actually be extremely constructive. Let that 21 EMA kind of curl up under price, support it, get that 50 SMA up under price as well, and then get one more push and start to move up the right-hand side. That would feel a lot more natural and set up a ton of awesome charts as they build out handles and right side. So I think that'd be extremely constructive. I'd love to see us build above or actually below that 14,000 level and then get a push up on volume reconfirmation off the moving averages. See that launching pad basically set up. If we go back here, we see the moving averages curl up under price here, as well as here, and then we get that strong push and move up towards all-time highs. And I think it's important to keep in mind that if you didn't capture all this move or missed out on some of it and saw some stocks rip without you, don't feel like you really missed out on anything because we're well below all-time highs. We're still below a lot of the moving averages. We haven't yet really started that nice trend, that power trend like we saw back in here. And many stocks are just building out the right-hand sides of their bases. And if this rally is truly going to last weeks and months, there's going to be so many amazing opportunities that you can take advantage of. And even if you feel like you missed a stock, most likely it will pull back at some point to a logical area, such as a prior pivot, moving average, where you can basically enter that potential true market leader. So be ready, be on guard, and build those watch lists and be ready to take advantage of those opportunities. And with that said, the past 4 days are very encouraging. We'll have to see how this develops further. And I'd love to see the 21 EMA kind of transition to being support instead of resistance as it was in this area right here, as well as back in this area. And I'd love to see us really get back above that 50 SMA, see that curl up under price, and make our way back to the 200 SMA. So moving on to the S&P 500, you can see very strong action in the past 4 days, just like the Nasdaq composite, but we formed a higher low here. So this index was stronger than the Nasdaq, which did undercut it. And we're a lot closer to that 200 SMA, as you can see right here. A little bit short-term extended, but we're back above the 21 EMA, and we're coming into logical resistance at the 200 SMA, as well as the 50 SMA, which is downtrending. So I'd love to see us kind of build here and then burst above that moving average on volume, get back above the 4,500 level. And you can see volume has been strong on this uptrend. Moving on, let's talk about the IWO, the Russell 2000 Growth Index. This looks obviously a little bit weaker than the Nasdaq as well as the S&P 500 overall, but we also didn't undercut this prior low, so it showed a little bit of strength relative to tech. And once again, very strong action in the past 4 days, back above this pivot, back above the 50 SMA, as well as the 21 EMA, which is now rising. So starting to see the move up the right-hand side, and you can see that we've got significant resistance right at 266. So maybe we get a push up here, consolidation below that. And then the optimal scenario would be maybe even a shakeout in here, a rally back above at 260, and then a breakout and fall through and a start of a push back towards that 200 SMA. So that would be ideal. Moving on to the IWM, Russell 2000 in general, you can see very similar action, higher low here, breaking above this pivot. And you can see we're right up against the 209.05 pivot, and we're back above the 21 and 50 SMA. So constructive action, but still a lot of work to do to build out the right-hand side of the space. And looking at how this consolidation is kind of structured, this could take quite a while, a few weeks to really form out and fully develop the right-hand side of this base. Bringing up also the FFTY, this is always good to look at as well, the Innovator IB50 ETF. A nice push, looks very similar to the IWO. We're against that 39.51 pivot, but we're back above the 50 SMA, which is in a downtrend, and we are back above the 21 EMA, which is starting to push up and kind of move up under price, which is constructive. But I would like to see this 50 SMA kind of flatline here and start to curl up under price. I think that would be very constructive, and that is going to take a little bit of time given the severity of this downtrend, but definitely some base building here and looks like a potential bottoming formation. You've got kind of an inverse head and shoulders. I'm sure people are talking about that a little bit, at least in the short-term sense, and we'll have to see what happens from here. I think it will take some time, but so far very constructive action, although you can see volume wasn't super high on last week's push upward. So moving on, let's talk about some growth stocks. I always like to bring up Tesla because I think it's a great barometer for growth stocks and kind of risk appetite in general. And you can see we had a strong breakout through this pivot. We're up against that 50 SMA, so into logical resistance. We're also up against this kind of structure here. So there's a lot of supply to work through at this level, but ideally we go sideways and tight, kind of absorb any supply there is, and then ideally have a little bit of a shakeout and a push towards that 1,000 level. I like seeing the volume coming in on this Friday. Great earnings, all of that, strong fundamentals, but the price action has to match. So definitely want to see us kind of solidify the trend above the 200 SMA, 21 EMA, and that 50 SMA. Next up, we've got NVIDIA, and like Tesla, this is kind of an institutional favorite, extremely liquid. This obviously in the chip space, which has actually been pretty strong. AOSL, AVGO, GFS is definitely an IPO that we'll take a look at in just a second. And this was extremely strong, especially on this Friday, getting back above that 50 SMA, 200 SMA, and 21 EMA, and pushing towards this 269.25 pivot. So might expect some turbulence here, some consolidation would be healthy, and then a push up towards the right hand side of this base. But definitely one to keep an eye on, and definitely a favorite growth stock for institutions, as you can see from the fund ownership. Moving on to the rest of the kind of FANG names. Facebook here, a nice rally the past few days, but obviously this is in a downtrend with this gap down, not really on my radar here. Amazon, let's bring up that chart. Strong push here, especially the past few days, really shaping up here. So we have to see how it acts versus this pivot, but I like seeing it back above that 3,000 level. And it's within this longer term consolidation, and going back to a weekly chart, you can see it's been basically basing for the past 12, 14 months now. So if this manages to break out to all-time highs, that's definitely significant. Bringing up the chart of Apple as well. Nice push here within the stage 3 double bottom base, and we have to see how it acts versus that 50 SMA, as well as this prior pivot, which lines up pretty closely to it. Netflix, another one within the FANG space, definitely a little bit weaker along with Facebook, but it's back above that 21 EMA and still has to face off that 50 SMA as well as the 400 level. This looks pretty weak, not really one that I'm focused on too much. And lastly, we've got Google here, and bringing up that chart, forming out this stage 1 consolidation. Standard pivot pretty much right at that 3,000 level. Funny how those things kind of work out. And you can see we just had a breakout through the pivot on Friday, but still has that 200 SMA to deal with right here. So a lot of these are kind of rallying into logical areas of potential resistance. That doesn't mean they're going to reverse hard, but keep in mind that you want to see constructive action, pullbacks on lower volume, tighter price action. All those would kind of solidify the character change in the market. Moving on, let's take a look at some names that have been holding up really well. We've got, of course, GFS within that growth space. I feel like everybody's talking about this one on Twitter here. We had a pivot through that 60 level as well as this prior kind of volatility contraction pivot, and then just shot up and broke out into all-time highs. Very, very strong on a really constructive volume. Look how low the volume is on this in this basically price tightness area, this volatility contraction, and then look at the volume coming in on the buy side. Really strong action. I love to see a consolidation here, tighten up again, maybe get a shakeout under this pivot back towards 70, and then finish above that pivot. That would be awesome. And then ideally we get a fall through, breaking out through that prior high. So definitely one to have on your radar. And if this is going to be a really strong leader, there will be so many chances to get in. We just have to be ready and have this on our focus list. Also bringing up AOSL. This has been strong within the chip space, as well as AVGO. The whole group is kind of shaping up a little bit and is progressing a little bit further along the right sides than other groups within the tech space. So definitely ones to keep in mind. Also bringing up the solar names. Let's bring up TAN, first of all, the ETF. These are kind of making a push off the bottom, and we got a nice pivot right at this area. And bring up a weekly chart. I think it's a nice upside reversal bar here. Very strong action off that 10-week line. and a nice big base here. So if it can push up through 80, I think this could start a nice move up the right hand side. Bringing up EMPH, you can see the strong prior uptrend on this name, now longer term basing period, and we're back above that 40-week line, but I would like to see more volume come in if it does break out next week right here. SCDG also shaping up here. You can see a nice close on the week, holding that 300 level, and you've got a clear pivot right here, and it's a little bit higher within the base and looks overall a little bit stronger than EMPH. Also, we've got FSLR. That's another one people like to focus on here. A little bit lower within the base, so kind of SCDG to me, going over to a daily chart, just looks a little bit cleaner, a little bit stronger. But you did have a secondary, a gap down on this day right here, and then an upside reversal here holding 300. So if it can kind of push up here right under the pivot, form a tight area, that would be ideal. And then a strong breakout on volume is what we want to see. So that is the solar names. Also worth mentioning are some other young IPOs. We've got Bros, super strong action breaking through these pivots, holding 50 as well. We've also got SG Sweet Green, which had a big downside reversal on Friday, but overall has been showing a lot of relative strength. And we just have to see whether this can kind of consolidate here, let that 21 EMA catch up to price and form a little bit of a handle here up the right hand side, but still one I think to keep an eye on, although I would like to see the overall group improve as well. Moving on to some material names, AMR continues to act pretty well. We also saw some oil and gas, energy related names continue to act well. We've got a nice inside day here on BTU. And going over to a 60-minute chart, I really like how this is kind of prepped up for next week. We've got a little bit of a DTL forming here, as well as a very tight area that just broke out of in the last hour on Friday with big volume coming in as well. Keep in mind it was kind of options expiration on Friday. Moving on, let's talk about a few other oil and gas names. COP, let's bring up that chart. Let's go over to a daily. Also right at that 100 level. It's funny how those things work out. Bringing up the shippers, we've got Zim here, which had a downside reversal on Thursday, negative action on Friday, but overall it was just a little bit short-term extended, still in a very strong uptrend. And I'd love to see it kind of build against 80 and let that 21 EMA catch up to price. GSL within that kind of same space. Looks like it's just kind of still building here, a little bit choppy, and it needs kind of a breakout, clean breakout through that 30 level. NUE in the steel producer group is also acting very strong, right at all-time highs. We had a little bit of a failed breakout here on this Wednesday, but building out a pivot right in this area, going over to a 60-minute chart. You can see that range building, and I would draw the pivot pretty much right here or even right here as well. This is still very strong, it's still in an uptrend. And likewise, we've got SLCA, which is super strong in terms of price and volume action, holding that 15 level and rebounding off that 21 EMA area. So overall, those are a few growth stock leaders that I'm kind of watching as of this moment. Let me know your thoughts down below on these setups, these stocks, and let me know kind of your top 5 ideas right at this moment. Drop them in the comments section below. And moving on to sentiment, let's start with my Twitter surveys here. We saw an increase from 22.4% bullish, which was the lowest reading in quite a while, maybe even back until March 2020, that correction. And we saw a jump to 34.3% bullish, which is still very, very low. So we are kind of climbing a wall of worry here. So we'll have to see how this develops. Moving on over to the name exposure index, we saw an increase here, but still pretty low at 46. And look at the Pokal ratio, we saw a decrease, but still kind of just in this choppy elevator range. And lastly, we've got the bulls versus bears poll, which is still just kind of going sideways, and we do have that cross of bears over the bulls. So overall sentiment is pretty low, and that is a good thing if we want to see this rally succeed. Moving on to the IBD big picture article, the headline is Stock Market Caps Bullish Week with More Gains, Nvidia Spikes Ahead of Investor Day. Reading through the article, it discussed the action on Friday, how the Nasdaq's outperformance wasn't necessarily fueled by technology stocks breaking out of bases. Instead, it was mostly beaten down software names, so something to keep in mind here. They also discussed PanW, another name to have on your radar here. And overall, I discuss a few other names here. MP, another stock to have on your radar. Materials that just broke out of a nice kind of VCP type base. Overall, their current outlook is a confirmed uptrend. We've got some leaders up in volume, down in volume as well. And lastly, we've got the wishing well GMI signal, which is still red. But I think with a few more days and strong action, this could turn green somewhat soon. And I believe we started a new QQQ short-term uptrend on last Friday. So keep that in mind. Keep an eye on this blog for the most recent updates. Overall, my current view is now an uptrend. I think it's okay to be taking longs, kind of testing out the waters, but definitely go ahead and practice progressive exposure, manage risk. Right now, coming off of last week, a lot of stocks had the best entries early on in the week when everything was still kind of very shaky and we had less certainty. That's kind of how it usually works. But now we've got some kind of clarification from the Fed about what they're doing. Maybe some resolution here, Ukraine, Russia, although that's still up a little bit up in the air. But I think the important thing is if you're making progress, keep working, keep taking longs. And if you're not, scale back. Wait for those opportunities, they will come. But I think the most important thing is to be ready for whatever happens. I love to see continued character changes. And if this rally is going to last weeks and months, there's going to be so many opportunities to get into leadership quality stocks. So don't feel like you've missed anything at this point. And make sure to always manage risk and practice progressive exposure. And with that, I hope you guys enjoy this video. Let me know your thoughts on the market down below in the comment section. I definitely want to know that. And thanks again for watching, and I'll see you guys in future videos. Thanks.